Fleeing the tax state. Businesses abandon Victoria in record numbers. Hi everyone and welcome to Ainslie Insights, brought to you by ainslie.com.au, the home of Ainslie Bullion, Ainslie Crypto, Ainslie Wealth and the Gold and Silver Standard. Be sure to have a look. Today, welcome back Katrina, who's been looking more into Victoria. She's had a few of these in the series, sort of looking at the specifics of what's going on in Victoria recently around the budget, other things that have been happening there, how it's impacted regional people and their properties. Today, sort of bringing it all together. How are you going today, Katrina?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chris. How are you going?
Yeah, good. I think it is a good way to bring it together with this topic of what you were talking to me about, this idea that there are actually a number of businesses that are really just leaving the state, and that's not a good thing. Let's start off today by addressing that sort of head on. What is going on there? Why are there so many businesses that are just sort of packing up and going somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a massive one that I think has been quite underreported. We're seeing many businesses literally fleeing Victoria for a number of reasons, including high taxes, especially on property side of things, excessive regulation for businesses, really an uncertain outlook on really what's going to happen to their business as well. So really, and I think I said to you before we even started, there was about 129,000 businesses that shut last year alone in Victoria, and that's crazy. We need the businesses in Victoria. We need people spending, and we need people going to cafes and shops, for our just general business in Melbourne and especially in the whole of Victoria. But it just seems as though they are definitely fleeing and leaving. And there's a lot of regulatory complexity around Victoria. The Business Council of Australia actually came out and said that Victoria is the least business-friendly state in the whole of Australia, and it's due to their uncompetitive payroll and property taxes. So, I mean, that's a massive one.
You've talked about taxes before, when specifically for the individual, saying there was a lot going on. I know you mentioned some of those taxes that particularly impacted regional communities. But when you talk about businesses and the tax burden, it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because you're really talking about businesses saying, look, to do what we want to do, the risks are just too high when you factor in those additional costs of those taxes. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you found from your research is really driving that decision for businesses?
Yeah, I definitely can. I mean, the taxes, I think, for individuals are definitely one thing in Victoria, but an added stress of these additional taxes and regulations is really hurting businesses. But we've seen a number of land tax hikes, stamp duties, and levies. So I might list a couple. I'm not going to go through them all because there's just too many, but I will list a couple. Obviously, we've got land tax that has had massive increase in valuations across particularly commercial property owners and investors hard in Victoria. So it even applies to vacant land and any non-income producing land or assets too. And people that are owners of multiple properties are facing higher thresholds, or people that are trying to get a tenant in there that don't have one at the moment are facing really high levies. Yes. Yeah. So sorry, keep going, Chris.
No, sorry. I was just going to say that's it seems like you would almost need specialists. I don't know the details of this, but this doesn't seem like it's something that as a business owner you can even really tackle yourself. You probably need your accountants to know what they're doing or other specialists to assist with some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just an extra burden. I mean, I think starting a business is already tough, and there's a lot of regulation and money that needs to be put forward, and obviously doing things correctly. I mean, this is just a whole nother headache for business owners, and we can tell why they're leaving. That's only the first point. I mean, we've got commercial and industry property tax. This is actually a new annual tax. So this is essentially replacing stamp duty, they're saying, and it's a new annual tax of about 1% of unimproved land value. and it applies to commercial and industrial properties across Victoria 10 years after their next transaction. So people argue, though, even though it says it's going to be 10 years, it's essentially a new permanent tax burden on people. Even though it's stamp duty is being phased out over the next couple of decades, it still remains increasingly high. And obviously, this commercial and industry property tax is going to, overtake it, and it's going to be a new tax, but it's very it doesn't provide any confidence for anyone that wants to start a business, let alone that wants to start another business in Victoria. So it's a lot of uncertainty between the two. You've got payroll tax. It's one of the highest rates in the country in Victoria. You've got development and planning levies, like I think we've spoken about before, windfall gains tax, which was heavily debated in Parliament, planning permit charges, and developers also claim that Victoria is the most expensive state to build in. And we've also got new mining royalties for small-scale operators. That was actually introduced in the May budget in Victoria. Basically, you need a prospecting or an exploration license, and obviously there's fees on top of those. So there are only a couple. I mean, there's many, many more, but you can see why people are not wanting to invest in Victoria the way that they used to.
I really am struggling with that. Going, how do you address that if you're a business owner? I would find just that list is too long for starters.
Yeah, it's crazy.
You can't. I'm going, how would I do that? I'm just trying to put myself in that situation going, how would I navigate that? I would need a lot of help.
100%. But it's just I think a lot of people in Victoria, we always talk about this confidence, and obviously in economic outlook, you want that confidence. You would like that projection or that projected value to follow your estimated figures. But when they're introducing all these new things left, right, and centre, I mean, how can you project anything? I mean, you just, you really can't. So it's one thing, obviously, to be a business owner 5 years ago in Victoria, another one to be one today, but who knows what the regulations are going to be in 5-10 years' time.
So where are these businesses going? If you're having an exodus from there, I'm not thinking that all those business people just go, that's it, I'm giving up.
Yeah, well, we've seen mass relocation of businesses in general to obviously Queensland, WA and New South Wales. So all three states offer much lower taxes for businesses, better growth opportunities, and they have much lower regulations that Victoria have. And a statistic here that I have is about 3,254 businesses alone relocated to Queensland. And there were 129 that shut down. So of those 129, I mean, I'm sure they're family businesses, smaller businesses. They probably couldn't relocate. I'm sure they would have loved to, if they got the opportunity and had that confidence that their business would thrive. But there's about 350 businesses closing a day. I mean, it is really, it's massive. It's massive. And also when you're getting the Business Council of Australia coming out and saying we need assistance because we're just losing so many people, it is really an issue.
I mean, obviously you look at this quite a lot and you have the answer to the idea that there's impacts on the economy, but how does that impact? Because there's going to be short-term impacts. I can imagine if you're a customer or a supplier for one of those businesses that's closing or relocating, there's an immediate impact. But the longer-term impacts, I imagine, would be quite profound.
100%. It's something that I look at quite a lot, and it's something that I do hope is amended in the future, because like you said, when we need these businesses to stay. If they are leaving, we are missing out on employment opportunities and the state revenue that we need in Victoria to recover, all this debt. So, I mean, continuing on from the debt and that sort of thing, I mean, Victoria does lead for the tax revenue, especially land tax, business insolvencies, and commercial property taxes. If we have so many of these businesses leaving, we are just losing so many opportunities. The government's also losing that revenue that they could, get GST. I mean, that's federal, but I'm just talking about even state tax-wise, they are just doubling down instead of, I guess, assisting these people. So a lot of people have come out and said it's more about a PR policy, with what's going on business-wise in Victoria, rather than assisting businesses. And if we don't assist businesses, it's going to affect our economy in many different areas. We've seen that already with a lot of property leaving. So obviously, people that have a business, sometimes they buy a property to secure that business, and it might be an investment property. We've seen 18 to 20,000, CoreLogic reported last year alone, have left. They're off the market, they've been sold, they've gone into state. So that's 20,000 homes that we could have had people live in. But, where are they going? I'm not sure. I think some of them still might be on the market, but we're losing those rental properties as a result of businesses closing down. People can't pay their staff properly. And it's as a result of this red tape and continued taxation hikes for these businesses.
You've raised in this conversation the idea that the state government definitely needs those taxes, that needs those revenues that come from the businesses. At the end of the day, the business is, or small business, or any business really, but small business in particular, is the engine house of the economy, because if people don't have the business, you don't have the job, and both of those, the employer and the employee, are paying taxes. Surely it's in the government's best interest to address this. You talked about the Business Council of Australia mentioning its concerns. Has it had responses from the state government? Is the state government taking it seriously? What's the go there?
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. They really just came out and said they haven't had much information from the government. They said that they felt like it was a PR policy to a large extent, because they weren't, they're there for consultation. They're there for the government to consult them when needed. And in this situation, it's very needed. And for them not to be consulted when it is such a drought business-wise in Victoria is really concerning. We need people in places and positions that have that experience. And everyone's going to pay some form of tax. I mean, that's just the way that it is. But the way that they are honing in on these small businesses and businesses in general is just killing the Victorian business economy. And for them to come out and say that it was basically a PR policy, it's very telling.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense to me of why the government can't see that in this case, because you would imagine they'd be very concerned about the revenue side of the balance sheet. And if
that's exactly right. And but Victoria can't be bailed out all the time either. I mean, we have a lot of, we speak about it in the office. We've got WA, they've got a massive mining operation there. They've got all that income, all those natural resources. Victoria sold off their, transport. They've sold off a lot of their infrastructure. So a lot of it is privatised already to pay off debt that was years ago. So we can't always bail out Victoria. I think sometimes people need to step in and say, enough is enough sometimes. Who will do it? I'm not sure, who is going to be that person. I mean, I'm sure there's been many, many emails and many, concerned citizens and business councils coming forward, but obviously it hasn't been enough to this extent to get their attention.
So to wrap it up, what happens if this doesn't get addressed? What are the risks if this just keeps going?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're definitely going to see more business closures. We're going to see stagnant economic growth. We're going to see higher unemployment, and we're going to see budget shortfalls. And if we see all of that, we might get downgraded again for our credit rating, which is just not what we want. And I think too, the debt that we have in Victoria is not providing anyone any confidence, like long term. So all these policies, or I guess policies and sort of little grabs that they, that the government has been giving people are very short term, and it's sort of a band-aid effect. So the long-term risks are definitely going to outweigh any short-term assistance that they can give people, because if we keep going down this road, like I said before, we're going to have all these a massive unemployment, the debt, our credit rating is going to go fall through, which we've seen Moody's already come out and said if there's no clear fiscal discipline and policy, they're going to have to relook at it, which is a massive, massive red flag for us borrowing in the future, and also Australia's standing.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a self-reinforcing problem. It's going to get feed on itself to get worse, and we don't want that.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems somewhat urgent that some of these things are addressed.
Yeah.
Look, always appreciate your deep dives on this. I know a lot of our viewers do as well, particularly those who are living in Victoria, but the messages there are quite clear for everyone really across the country, because this is not an isolated situation where you've got concerns over businesses being that driver of the economy. It's really important that we look after them. So I think it's really valuable to bring that to our attention. So thank you for your work on that today, Katrina.
No worries. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming back on. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll chat again soon.